Seoul scrambles jets in response to Chinese bombers entering its airspace. The South Korean Air Force sent fighter jets into the sky Monday in response to an unannounced intrusion of the Korean Air Defense Identification Zone (KADES) by 5 People's Liberation Army Air Force (PLAF) aircraft from China, the Korea Times reports. The PLAF aircraft group consisted of 2 nuclear-capable H-6 strategic bombers, 2 J-11 fighter planes, and 1 Tu-154 spy plane, according to South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff. A group of F-15K fighters were marshaled to monitor the activity after the PLAF aircraft entered KADES Monday morning, the Korea Times reports. The F-15Ks identified the types of Chinese military aircraft that were present and took normal tactical measures until the Chinese planes left, a Joint Chiefs of Staff official told the news outlet. Beijing reportedly communicated with the South Korean military via a hotline to inform Seoul that the PLAF aircraft were conducting routine training operations and did not intend to enter South Korea's airspace, the South Korean military official noted. We contacted the Chinese side through our hotline and they said they had been conducting regular exercises, the defense official told reporters, adding, "We are still in the process of analyzing the Chinese military's exact intentions." The location of Chinese warplanes alarming the South Korean Air Force is an area where Japanese, South Korean and Chinese ADIZs overlap, according to local reports. It appears that China's goal was to reconfirm its ADIZ and conduct reconnaissance of Japan, Park Byung-kwang, a researcher at the Institute for National Security Strategy in Seoul, told Korea Jungang Daily. Since South Korean President Moon Jae-in and Chinese President Xi Jinping recently held a 5-hour summit last Thursday, it doesn't seem like China held the drills targeting South Korea, the researcher said. Moon and Xi apparently completely overcame the awkwardness regarding the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense (THAAD) missile batteries installed by the U.S. and South Korea, a source close to Moon told the Yonhap news agency. Even though the THAAD issue isn't resolved completely, the frequency and intensity with which China raised the issue became markedly lower, the aide said Sunday. North Korea breeding secret army full of suicide terrorists. A North Korea defector has warned the regime is breeding a secret army ready to carry out undercover attacks across the world. Tyrant Kim Jong-un has dragged the globe to the brink of nuclear war this year after a series of reckless missile tests. Fears are growing over a North Korean strike as its nuclear weapons program rapidly develops. However, the true threat may come from a group of suicide terrorists primed to attack. Defector Joo-il Kim told Express.co.uk, there is a secret group, secret armies, undercover armies inside North Korea. They were picked by the military leaders and nurtured to be weapons and terrorists. North Korea already boasts one of the world's largest armies, with 1.2 million troops. Joo-il added, they do not have their own personal belief. They are just brainwashed, they just believe what they are told. No one knows what they are doing. They live and they die for Kim Jong-un. That's what they believe in. They are like robots, they don't think for themselves. They could act as suicide bombers. South Korea Foreign Minister, Cho Hyun, this weekend warned that the Hermit Kingdom is rapidly developing weapons fit for global annihilation. However, Joo-il also stressed the real threat was miniaturized nukes that could be strapped to suicide attackers. He added, they make the robot soldiers carry the backpacks, infiltrate the free world and then fire the bomb anywhere they want, like suicide terrorists. North Korea test-fired its latest missile last month and fired it into Japanese waters. Kim boasted the ICBM is capable of reaching the U.S. mainland. Daily Star Online previously revealed that U.S. President Donald Trump may soon invade the Hermit Kingdom, North Korea threat. This is how Kim Jong-un could trigger reaction from U.S. North Korea could spark an instant reaction from the U.S. if they detonate a nuclear missile above ground, a retired U.S. Navy admiral has warned. North Korea has ramped up its development of nuclear and ballistic missiles, prompting World War III fears. The U.S. president was wrapped up in a war of words with Kim Jong-un as both sides threatened military strikes on each other. James Stavridis, a former Navy admiral, warned that if North Korea detonates a nuclear missile above ground it would spark an instant reaction from the United States. He told MSNBC, "I think it is probably about a 10% chance that it all falls apart and we end up with nuclear detonation on the peninsula from Kim Jong-un. I disagree with the idea that we would have to go all the way the minute the first missile goes. I think you can do a lot symbolically, going after the North Korean fleet for example while it is in port. You can go after specific sites, but of course the worry is that Kim Jong-un would respond with artillery on Seoul and then it just ratchets up. So legitimate worry. I think there is still some room for negotiation here. I think if Kim Jong-un launches one above ground, a nuclear detonation, that would be a moment of peak tension but it will also be a moment of peak opportunity and hopefully at that point even China would step in with us and really put a blockade on the sky, both maritime and on the land border with China. That would choke up the economy, that would force him to the table." The comments come after South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham said the possibility of military conflict still remains low but predicted a significant upwards shift in the possibility if Kim Jong-un fires another test missile. Senator Graham said, "I should say there's a 3 in 10 chance we use the military option. If the North Koreans conduct an additional test of a nuclear bomb, their 7th, I would say 70%. North Korea's most recent missile test took place on November 29, and the regime said the Hwasong-15 missile soared to an altitude of about 2,780 miles, 4,475 kilometers, and flew 590 miles, 950 kilometers, during its 53-minute flight before landing in the Seinu, Japan." After the missile test Kim Jong-un declared that the North had finally realized the great historic cause of completing the state nuclear force. President Donald Trump has now urged Vladimir Putin and Russia to side with the United States in a hope to bring an end to North Korea's nuclear ambitions. Donald Trump must attack North Korea soon despite threat to Seoul. Donald Trump must attack North Korea soon to wipe out its nuclear threat, a former U.S. ambassador to the UN has warned. John Bolton admitted there was a huge risk of South Korea being hit by its despotic neighbor in retaliation for any U.S. military action, putting hundreds of thousands in peril. But he said the president would not be able to ignore the threat for much longer as Pyongyang's military ambitions showed no sign of ending. Speaking at a Republican dinner in Asheville, North Carolina, he said nobody wanted World War III to break out. But he claimed, "I will just say this. The President of the United States' first duty is to protect Americans. You have to make the choice at some point whether the risks are greater in preventing North Korea from getting the capability of blackmailing or actually attacking the United States against the dangers of, the consequences of, a preemptive strike." Slamming previous failed attempts to negotiate with Kim Jong-un's regime, he claimed the time for talking was nearing an end. And he warned the hermit state could sell its deadly weaponry to other despotic regimes like Iran, ramping up the threat to the West. He told the audience, "Whatever North Korea has today, Iran could have tomorrow by writing a large enough check." And he dismissed claims that Pyongyang could be contained with Cold War-style tactics. Mr. Bolton said, "It's a myth to think that a regime as irrational in our terms as North Korea or as extreme ideologically as Iran are going to be deterred in the same way. I just think as citizens we've all got responsibility to think about this, because if we don't stop nuclear proliferation here, we're not going to stop it anywhere." Mr. Bolton has previously warned the U.S. must destroy Pyongyang's military capabilities after it launched a missile capable of striking the U.S. His latest comments came as the North warned the U.S. to prepare for a nuclear war. A state-run newspaper said plans for a sea blockade cannot be tolerated. It warned, "A naval blockade is an act of wanton violation of the sovereignty and dignity of an independent state and an act of war of aggression which cannot be tolerated." The gang of Trump is taking an extremely dangerous and big step towards the nuclear war by recklessly seeking the naval blockade against our country, neglecting the strategic prestige of our country that has achieved the great historic cause of completing the state nuclear force. The US and South Korea have taken part in a series of joint military drills in recent days as a show of defiance to the North. The military training took place between Tuesday and Friday and is said to have replicated how weapons of mass destruction would be destroyed in the hermit state. U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis has suggested a ground invasion is required in order to stop the threat posed by Kim's saber-rattling regime. North Korea warning, suicide bomber army ready to infiltrate free world warns defector. North Korea is ready to send a suicide bomber army equipped with nuclear backpacks across the world, a defector has warned. North Korea has a secret army of brainwashed robots who live and die for despot Kim Jong-un, the London-based defector revealed. Joo Kim exclusively told Express.co.uk North Korea was not militarily strong enough to bomb their rivals in the traditional sense but were ready to infiltrate the free world with a crack squad of suicide bombers. Mr. Kim, who lives in New Malden, South London along with a 100-strong population of other North Korean defectors, explained a group of specially selected killers were the hermit state's biggest asset. He said, the top-level leaders won't wage war. They know they can't win the war. But there is a secret group, secret armies, undercover armies inside North Korea. They were picked by the military leaders and nurtured to be weapons and terrorists. He said these soldiers were so devoted to Kim they would give their lives for him. He compared them to robots who had no thoughts of their own and merely obeyed North Korea's dictatorial administration. Mr. Kim said, they do not have their own personal belief. They are just brainwashed, they just believe what they are told. No one knows what they are doing. They live and they die for Kim Jong-un. That's what they believe in. They are like robots, they don't think for themselves. They could act as suicide bombers. When asked whether they could attack nearby rivals like South Korea or Japan, Mr. Kim replied, of course. He said while much of the international focus was on North Korea's missile progress, the real threat was miniaturized nuclear weapons or explosions which could be detonated by a single agent. He explained, North Korea has been trying to make nuclear weapons smaller and smaller. Not just to attach to missiles, they want to create so-called nuclear backpacks. They make the robot soldiers carrying the backpacks, infiltrate the free world and then fire the bomb anywhere they want, like suicide terrorists. He warned even if nuclear weapons could not be sufficiently miniaturized, other weapons could still be transported by these deadly soldiers. He said, North Korea is already ready to send out the terrorists across the world, carrying biological and chemical weapons. North Korea spy caught, man arrested in Australia for selling weapons of mass destruction. A North Korean spy has been caught by police for trying to sell components of weapons of mass destruction, police in Australia have claimed. Police have confirmed the arrest of Chan Hon Choi, 59, who has now been charged with 2 counts of attempting to sell missiles and with another 4 under legislation enforcing United Nations and Australian sanctions against North Korea. Police swooped on Eastwood, a suburb of Sydney on Saturday in a dramatic arrest to prevent a sale allegedly worth tens of millions of dollars. The suspect was arrested for attempting to sell WMD-related equipment and warheads, including software for the guidance systems of ballistic missiles. The charges are the first of their kind to be brought in Australia as tensions between Pyongyang and the rest of the West heat up. AFP Assistant Commissioner Neil Gaughton told reporters, this man was a loyal agent of North Korea, to believe he was acting to serve some higher patriotic purpose. This case is like nothing we have ever seen on Australian soil. Choi was also allegedly involved in coal sales to Indonesia and Vietnam as North Korea is hit with sanctions which are strangling its economy. Police described Choi as a loyal agent who believed himself to be acting for some higher patriotic purpose. He was born in South Korea but lived in Australia for more than 30 years and was a naturalized citizen, police said. Working as a hospital cleaner, he lived by himself in a rental unit in the Sydney suburb of Eastwood and was known in the local Korean Christian community. However, his former church friends claim they broke off their friendship with him when he began to express support for North Korea. He had allegedly turned and visited the rogue regime frequently, with one acquaintance saying, I hated that my husband met with him and I don't like anything related to North Korea. All those trips to North Korea, he was very private and we thought it was very strange. China is leading the refusal to deal with Pyongyang, which is refusing to back down from its accelerating nuclear program. Gaughan said the man had been in touch with high-ranking North Korean officials but no missile components ever made it to Australia. He also said there was no indication officials in Indonesia or Vietnam had been involved in the attempted coal sales. Gaughan said, "This is Black Market 101. We are alleging that all the activity occurred offshore, and was purely another attempt for this man to trade goods and services as a way to raise revenue for the government of North Korea." The Sydney man was identified by the Australian Broadcasting Corporation and other media as 59-year-old Chan Hom Choi, who they said had been living in Australia for more than 30 years and was of Korean descent. He was arrested in on Saturday and was due to face court later on Sunday, police said, after Mr. Choi came to the attention of authorities earlier this year. Cash-strapped North Korea has come under a new round of stricter United Nations sanctions this year after pressing ahead with its missile and nuclear programs in defiance of international pressure. Tensions have risen dramatically on the Korean peninsula because of the North's ballistic missile launches and its sixth and most powerful nuclear test, as well as joint military drills between South Korea and the United States that the North describes as preparation for war. The Australian Federal Police, AFP, said the man will be in court on Wednesday. It will be taken care of. Donald Trump pledges to deal with North Korea crisis. President Donald Trump has warned the world has no choice but to deal with the North Korean crisis, but vowed it will be taken care of. In a major speech addressing his administration's national security strategy, the president said Kim Jong-un's nuclear-armed regime cannot be allowed to threaten the world. He said recent sanctions had been successful in isolating the hermit state, but warned there was much more work to do. Mr. Trump also blamed previous administrations for not taking care of the situation. Speaking at the Ronald Reagan Building and International Trade Center in Washington, D.C., he said, "This situation should have been taken care of long before I got into office when it was much easier to handle. But it will be taken care of. We have no choice." Our campaign of maximum pressure on the North Korean regime has resulted in the toughest ever sanctions. We have united our allies in an unprecedented effort to isolate North Korea. However, there is much more work to do. America and its allies will take all necessary steps to achieve a denuclearization and ensure that this regime cannot threaten the world. Tensions are running high on the Korean peninsula as Kim's regime continues to develop nuclear weapons and long-range ballistic missiles. The Hermit Kingdom recently tested its latest Hwasong-15 rocket, which it claims has the range to target anywhere in the United States and Europe. A series of crippling sanctions targeting oil imports and the regime's biggest turning exports were imposed earlier this year. But despite widespread condemnation, Kim has continued in his relentless pursuit of weapons of mass destruction, and the long-range weaponry needed to get them to their targets.